President Trump made carrying out the largest mass deportation in U.S. history a cornerstone of his 2024 campaign. But there are reports he's unhappy with the pace of that effort so far.
William Brangham reports now on a new controversial tactic to carry out the administration's crackdown on illegal migration.
The U.S. government is getting tough on people who come into the country without the right papers. A news site called The Intercept says that the government is now working with other countries to send undocumented migrants back. Not just anywhere, but to places that are far away and even dangerous.
This plane landed in San Jose, Costa Rica last week, descending through a cloud of uncertainty. On board were 135 people deported from the U.S. on a journey back to their home countries or somewhere else. None are Costa Rican citizens.
Vienen 65 niños.
There are 65 children and 70 adults. They are families. Costa Rica is committed to voluntarily returning deportees to their country of origin in up to 30 days.
The group, hailing from as far away as China, Vietnam, and Ghana, were then bused to a rural holding facility paid for by the U.S. Costa Rica became the second Central American country after Panama to serve as a stopover for unauthorized migrants being removed from the U.S. by the Trump administration. Panama accepted almost 300 deportees who were initially held under armed guard in this Panama City hotel. Images of that group, stuck inside, unable to leave, made headlines last week.
We are providing them with all the necessary medical, food, and comfort services, and we will continue to do so until the last one has left our country, which is what was agreed with the United States government.
More than half agreed to be returned to their home countries. 97 were sent to a facility in the Darien Gap, a treacherous point of passage at Panama's southern border with Colombia, which is used by many migrants. Susana Sabalza is a Panamanian migration lawyer representing a Taiwanese family, including a child under 5, who were sent to the Darien facility. Do you have any understanding as to what the conditions are like in that facility?
I haven't seen the conditions with my own eyes, but I've spoken to reporters who have, and they said the conditions weren't pleasant. We have to keep in mind the children, who are the future of humanity. If they're experiencing this type of trauma in a tropical refugee camp, I want to know that they are doing well and that they have good care.
If we could get them out of our country, we have other countries that would take them.
Experts who spoke to the reporters believe this isn't just about sending people back. They say it's meant to scare others from trying to come in the first place. Basically, by sending migrants to hard and risky places, the U.S. hopes fewer people will try to cross the border illegally.
A number of countries have updated their travel advice to the United States in the wake of a crackdown on immigration by the Trump administration. Travelers have reported being detained at the U.S. border even though they had valid travel visas. Germany updated its travel advisory for the U.S. this week after a number of its citizens were detained at customs and then deported.
What was intended as a short vacation turned into a nightmare. German tourist Lukas Silaf was detained upon arrival in the US and hauled into a detention facility.
They put me in chains everywhere, around my stomach, on my hands, my feet. Then they put me in a van and drove me to the detention center in Satinko.
Lucas was returning to the U.S. from a vacation in Mexico. He says he had a valid U.S. tourist visa, but ended up spending 16 days in detention before being allowed to return to Germany. And his arrest is part of an apparent trend involving temporary visa holders and visitors being detained by U.S. border officials on their way into the country. Canadian actress Jasmine Mooney has a similar story. She was detained for 12 days over an incomplete visa.
There was no heads up. Next thing you know, I'm taken and for 2 weeks haven't been told anything, moved in different cells, sleeping on cement, sleeping in different jail cells. Like, it just, nothing makes sense to me.
A French scientist, in turn, was denied entry into the U.S. after his phone was searched by customs. Officials at the airport found messages criticizing the Trump administration's cuts to science programs. All deportees say they did not violate U.S. immigration policies nor commit any crimes. The incidents follow heightened immigration enforcement under the Trump administration.
One place that's reportedly being talked about is Guantanamo Bay, the military base in Cuba. That's a big deal because the prison there has a bad reputation and has been involved in a lot of controversy over the years. The U.S. is also talking to about 19 countries about taking in deported migrants. These include places like Angola, Benin, Libya, Honduras, Moldova, Mexico, Mongolia, Rwanda, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. The U.S. sees these countries as far enough and safe enough to send people to, but some people are worried they're anything but safe. According to the report, the number of deportation flights is expected to go up soon, which could mean even more people will be sent away quickly. This has made things really uncertain and scary for undocumented migrants already in the country.
The president has made no secret of the fact that he believes that he won this election using immigration as a calling card. And that message has not been lost on every single agency head and cabinet member of this administration. They have decided that deportation machinery is now #1 paragraph of their job description. What we have now seen is that we are enlisting nation states in that enterprise.
Earlier this month, on his first international trip, Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Central America, including stops in both Panama and Costa Rica. Amid threats of U.S. tariffs, sanctions, and even retaking control of the Panama Canal, the countries agreed to serve as a stopover for deportees.
We do a lot of other things with Panama that go beyond just the canal. I mean, they've been a great partner on the slowing down the rate of migration on the Darien and the coming across the Darien Gap and the like. So I think it was a good visit.
The Department of Homeland Security, which is central to the administration's deportation policy, did not respond to NewsHour's request for comment. But Muzaffar Chishti says the process raises many questions, as does the administration's overall approach to migrants so far.
There may be violations of U.S. law, especially with respect to people who have expressed fear of being returned. The fact that they were not given access to counsel, the fact that they were not provided due process. The second most important consideration is that this is being done with militaristic imagery. I mean, it's not just optics, it's optics with sound. It's sort of an orchestra of military machinery at work that I think is deeply un-American.
When asked about all this, the U.S. State Department did say they're working on the migration issue, but they didn't name any of the countries they're talking to. They only said they're working with leaders from around the region to try and control illegal immigration. In fact, Trump is offering $1,000 to people who self-deport.
We are following breaking news as the Trump administration says that it will pay illegal immigrants $1,000 to voluntarily leave the country. I did want to bring some more details of this breaking news. This announcement today saying that the administration will pay immigrants in the United States illegally who have returned to their home country voluntarily. They will pay them $1,000. This as the Trump administration continues on its mass deportation agenda. The Department of Homeland Security issuing a news release moments ago saying that will also pay for travel assistance and that the people who use an app called CBP Home to tell the government that they plan to return home, those will be deprioritized for detention and removal by immigration enforcement. Secretary Kristi Noem saying, quote, if you are here illegally, self-deportation is the best, safest, and most cost-effective way to leave the United States to avoid arrest. DHS is now offering illegal aliens financial travel assistance and a stipend to return to their home country through the CBP Home app, end quote. Now, President Trump has made immigration enforcement one of the key priorities, along with mass deportation of immigrants in the United States illegally, but it is costly and labor intensive. This comes as the Republican administration is pushing Congress for a large increase in resources for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department, the department responsible for removing people from the country. So I did want to share that breaking news, and I'm taking a look right now at the Homeland website right here. It says, quote, today the Department of Homeland Security announced a historic opportunity for illegal aliens to receive both financial and travel assistance to facilitate travel back to their home country through the CBP Home app.
Today I signed an executive order to launch the first ever self-deportation program for illegal aliens. We are making it as easy as possible for illegal aliens to leave America. Any illegal alien can simply show up at an airport and receive a free flight out of our country. We have also launched a phone app called CBP Home. That's CBP Home, where illegals can book a free flight to any foreign country. As long as it's not here, you can go anywhere you want. We're also adding a very important exit bonus for illegals to further incentivize their self-deportation. This deportation bonus will save American taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. What Biden did to this country can never be explained, will never, ever be accepted. Eventually, when the illegals are gone, it will save us trillions of dollars. However, if illegal aliens choose to remain in America, they're remaining illegally and they will face severe consequences. Illegal aliens who stay in America face punishments including significant jail time, enormous financial penalties, confiscation of all property, garnishment of all wages, imprisonment and incarceration, and sudden deportation in a place and manner solely of our discretion. So to all illegal aliens who book your free flight right now, we want you out of America, but if you're really good, we're going to try and help you get back in. Thank you.
The U.S. Supreme Court also just made a big move in a case about 2 Venezuelan migrants in Texas. They stepped in and blocked the government from using a really old law from the 1700s to quickly deport them. This law is called the Alien Enemies Act, and it was first created during wartime, back in 1798. President Trump has been trying to use it to speed up deportations, but the court didn't agree with that, for now. Only 2 justices, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, said no to the court's decision. Everyone else supported it. The court didn't decide if Trump was right or wrong to use the Alien Enemies Act overall, but they did say that the Venezuelan migrants had a right to get help before being kicked out of the country. We have long held that no person shall be removed from the United States without opportunity at some time to be heard, the court majority wrote.
This is a 7-2 ruling, so it's a divided court, but at this point the message is unequivocal. The Trump administration cannot resume those 18th century wartime power emergency expedited deportations from its federal detention center in Bluebonnet, Texas. The hold on those Alien Enemies Act deportations remains until an appeals court, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, weighs in on the broader issue. But the Supreme Court maintains its concern about due process, that there has to be a review or a period for would-be deportees to challenge their deportation. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is going to have to review that matter as well, but all of this feels like it's on its way back to the Supreme Court eventually for further review.
Now, a judge also reviewed the use of state secrets privilege in the Kilmar Abrego Garcia deportation case. What were your key takeaways from the hearing?
Lots of busy courthouses on a Friday afternoon, but the federal courthouse in Greenbelt, Maryland is humming with an extended set of arguments today in this very high-profile case. The March 15th Alien Enemies Act deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from Maryland. The administration has already acknowledged that deportation was by mistake. Abrego Garcia was protected from a prior court order from being sent to El Salvador, a country he fled years earlier. The administration has been under orders from the court in Maryland to return Abrego Garcia to U.S. custody. They have not done so. They've challenged that. But today, a lot of this was being run through the mud of what's taking so long. Why are things stuck? Why is this like walking in quicksand for the court to get what it ordered to have happen? The administration says it is moving as forthcoming as it can, as quickly as it can with information on this case. The judge, clearly frustrated, wants more answers and wants them more quickly. But this case, 2 months later, remains stuck in that mud.
That means the court believes everyone, including undocumented migrants, should get a fair chance to explain their side before being deported. It's something called due process. Trump's team says that's why they want to use the Alien Enemies Act, because they believe the U.S. is facing a kind of invasion and needs to act fast. But the law has only been used 3 times before, and only during actual wars. A lot of legal experts think using it now is a huge stretch. Now, though, judges are warning that giving Trump so much leeway could lead to him becoming bolder and deporting even U.S. citizens.
A growing number of federal judges are issuing warnings that the Trump administration's mass deportations could expand to include U.S. citizens. Politico reports some courts have noted that the Constitution's Fifth Amendment involving due process makes no distinction between citizens or non-citizens. We're on all things immigration. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano is here in Studio 57. So, Lilia, let's talk about a program in California. The Department of Homeland Security has subpoenaed California's cash assistance program for immigrants. What are they looking for and why?
So this is a program that is, by the way, state funded. This is not that federal funds are going to it. So that's important to note if people are concerned that immigrants are receiving Social Security benefits, which they don't. They pay taxes. They receive very few of the benefits. But specifically in the subpoena, they're looking for the names of people, the date of birth, application, the copies of the applications that they submitted, their immigration status, proof of ineligibility, and the affidavits that were signed for them by people who support their applications. That proof of ineligibility, what that means is if you cannot receive, because of your immigration status, certain benefits, and this only applies for the people in California who receive them are people who are elderly, blind, and disabled. It's a very small number of people who actually are part of this program, who can benefit from this program. So part is that. But the concern that immigration attorneys and people who support these immigrants who live with them, perhaps family members, the ones who have submitted these affidavits, have expressed is over their privacy. There's a concern that this might be a way to pursue the administration's goal of mass deportation. Now you're asking legally for information to be provided, not just from these people who are legally in the States, not citizens, but legally, or in some small, very few cases, people who are not eligible for deportation but might be undocumented. Again, it's a small number of people, but that this information could put them and their communities at risk.
Several judges in different states have blocked the use of this law for fast deportations. But one judge in Pennsylvania said the government could use it if they gave migrants at least 21 days notice first. When the Supreme Court got involved on Friday, they didn't decide whether Trump's argument made sense or not. Instead, they focused just on whether these 2 Venezuelan men should be protected from being deported right away. The court said there was evidence showing the government had already tried to use a law on April 18th, even taking the men to an airport before bringing them back.
Back in March, President Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act to send hundreds of Venezuelans to El Salvador's mega prison. The U.S. is paying El Salvador millions of dollars to house those deportees. President Trump appeared to respond to the ruling Friday, writing on Truth Social, quote, "The Supreme Court won't allow us to get criminals out of our country." CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson is here for more analysis on this decision. And CBS News Justice Department correspondent Scott McFarland is in Washington as well. Jess, let's start with you. Break down this ruling for us.
So the court, as you said, did not rule on the merits. What the court did is send this back to the Fifth Circuit and with some directions. And the directions that the court gave by a 7-2 ruling here was basically Fifth Circuit, go back, look at whether or not there's enough notice that's being given to people. We don't think there is. And now evaluate whether or not a preliminary injunction can be in place. Look at the potential success of these claims. So really do get to the substance of this. This is a ruling both based on notice, which is a process issue, and also based on substance, saying we think that that you need to do some serious weighing of the potential burdens and benefits of implementing the Alien Enemies Act for the first time during peacetime. Of course, there were also some divisions in the ranks, but to me, that was the big takeaway from the order is go back to the Fifth Circuit, have them evaluate the preliminary injunction, and have them look at what amount of notice is enough. 24 hours is not.
So Justice Kavanaugh said in a separate concurring opinion that instead of sending it back to the appeals court, the justices should just decide on this now. What was his reasoning?
His reasoning is this is timely. He said, given everything that's going on, essentially given the fact that he thinks there are exigent circumstances, he says basically let's not let this ping pong throughout the federal system. Let's just take it. Let's just decide on the merits, and let's provide lower courts with a ruling on whether or not you can use the Alien Enemies Act to deport this Venezuelan gang during, again, peacetime. We know that the Alien Enemies Act has only been used 3 times in our nation's history, all during wartime. And Justice Kavanaugh is ready to make a determination about whether or not it can be used for a 4th time.
The justices said they had to step in, or else the men might be sent away before the court could even do anything. Justice Brett Kavanaugh added that the court should settle this once and for all. The circumstances call for a prompt and final resolution, which likely can be provided only by this court, he said. Thomas and Alito didn't agree. They said the lower court should have had more time to deal with the case first.
How quickly do you expect the Fifth Circuit to weigh in?
I know. I don't know. I mean, I know everybody wants to know that. We have the Supreme Court saying, go back, do your job. That tends to weigh heavily on Court of Appeals judges' minds when the Supreme Court says, I need you to look at this. So I'm going to use words like all deliberate speed or pretty quickly. I'm not going to use words like 3 days or 3 weeks.
What can you tell us about Alito and Thomas's dissents?
So what they said, number one, is they don't think that there's jurisdiction. And what that means, and this is going to sound a little detailed, is that the way this case came up to the Supreme Court was not the typical appellate process. And what they're saying is that the order that was appealed up to the court, they don't actually have the power to hear an appeal of that order. Then they also went on to say that they're not sure that there should be a preliminary injunction in this case. And that really gets to their view of the merits, meaning it seems like they are at least giving a nod to the idea that they think that the administration can, at this point, use that statute, use the Alien Enemies Act in order to deport people. So I think what we're beginning to see on the very broadest level is the 7-2 division in the court on this issue of using the Alien Enemies Act. Again, not a ruling on the merits, not a ruling on the substance yet.
After the decision, Trump went off on his social media platform, Truth Social. He said, the Supreme Court won't allow U.S. to get criminals out of our country. In another post, he called it a bad and dangerous day in America. He complained that giving people the right to a fair hearing would take too long and cost too much money. He also argued that the court was stopping him from doing the job he was elected to do. The Supreme Court of the United States is not allowing me to do what I was elected to do, he wrote. He warned that giving people long legal hearings could lead to bedlam in the country. He's even challenged the Supreme Court in the case of birthright citizenship.
The U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in one of the most consequential cases of the year, the ability for President Trump to carry out his executive order ending birthright citizenship. That's the constitutionally protected right of citizenship for those born in the United States, regardless of their parents' nationality or immigration status.
The central question in this case, though, is the limits of judicial power, namely universal injunctions, which allow a federal judge to issue a nationwide block to executive orders. In recent months, several district court judges have used nationwide injunctions to pause a number of the Trump administration's policies, including an executive order which seeks to end birthright citizenship. Today, the government argued those judges are overstepping their constitutional authority. Earlier, President Trump weighed in, posting on social media, quote, birthright citizenship is about the babies of slaves, and it had nothing to do with illegal immigration for people wanting to scam our country. We will sort that out in a moment. But outside the court today, a group of attorneys general who are challenging the president's order said the question of birthright citizenship has long been settled.
157 years ago, we came together as a nation post-Civil War and said never again were we going to debate whether babies born on American soil are entitled to the rights and privileges of American citizenship. And contrary to what the United States is saying, citizenship doesn't turn on or turn off when you cross state lines.
And joining us now to discuss today's arguments are Amanda Frost, professor of Immigration and Citizenship Law at the University of Virginia, and Amy Howe, co-founder of SCOTUS blog and our new Supreme Court analyst here at the NewsHour. Welcome to you both. And Amy, it's great to have you here officially in your new role.
Thanks very much.
So several justices today underscored the fact that the focus of today's arguments wasn't really about the merits of the case, but rather on nationwide injunctions. What's your sense of why that was the government's focus and strategy?
I think the government was trying to isolate this. This is an issue that has been the bane of both Democratic and Republican administrations, as the Trump Solicitor General D. John Sauer said in his presentation to the justices. This is a bipartisan issue, and it has the issue of universal injunctions has really stopped the Trump administration from being able to implement a variety of policies and orders since the start of the Trump administration on January 20th. And they really wanted the justices to focus on these universal injunctions, including because in recent years, several justices have expressed skepticism about the propriety of universal injunctions and suggested that the courts should weigh in on them.
Trump has often said that courts get in the way of his plans. But critics say his actions, especially if he ignores court decisions, could hurt how the U.S. government is supposed to work. That includes the checks and balances that keep one part of the government from having too much power. After the ruling, the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, spoke out in support of the court's decision. The court's decision to stay removals is a powerful rebuke to the government's attempt to hurry people away to a gulag-type prison in El Salvador, said Lee Jelland, deputy director of the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project. The use of a wartime authority during peacetime, without even affording due process, raises issues of profound importance.
Since Trump took office, the U.S. has expelled hundreds of immigrants and asylum seekers to El Salvador without due process, accusing many of belonging to gangs largely on the basis of having tattoos. One Venezuelan asylum seeker now held in the Salvadoran prison was removed for tattoos on each forearm that read Mom and Dad. This week, the U.S. admitted in a court filing that a Salvadoran dad with protected status was also among the hundreds of immigrants who were transferred to El Salvador. He was living with his family in Maryland. Kilmar Armando Abrego had been granted protected status in 2019, blocking the federal government from sending him back to El Salvador after he fled gang violence there. The Trump administration said Garcia was removed, quote, because of an administrative error, and that, though it could not bring him back because it's now he's in custody of El Salvador. Conservatives like MAGA podcaster Joe Rogan are also joining and speaking out against the removal of a professional makeup artist accused of being a gang member, calling the case horrific.
You got to get scared that people who are not criminals are getting like lassoed up and deported and sent to like El Salvador prisons. This is kind of crazy that could be possible. That's horrific, and that's bad for the cause. Like, the cause is let's get the gang members out. Everybody agrees, but let's not.
Even though the court has a strong conservative majority, 6 conservative justices to 3 liberal ones, 3 of the justices who agreed with Friday's decision were actually appointed by Trump himself. The U.S. government is clearly changing how it handles immigration, and it's getting a lot tougher. Some people are even calling it extreme. One part that's raising eyebrows is that the U.S. might start sending undocumented migrants to far-off countries like Uzbekistan. That's setting off alarm bells for people who work in diplomacy and national security. Many have criticized as double standards for admitting South African refugees.
And the South African government and refugee advocates are rebuking the Trump administration for welcoming 59 white South Africans as refugees. The president told reporters Monday he admitted the refugees because of the, quote, genocide that's taking place. South Africa recently passed a new Expropriation Act, which aims to address historical land injustices established during apartheid. Now, South Africa's government strongly disputes Trump's characterization, saying there is no persecution of white Afrikaners in his country. Let's bring in Professor Ruth Hall from the University of Western Cape in South Africa for more on this. Professor Hall, thanks for joining us. Can you just start by explaining the Expropriation Act, what it does, and why it's so controversial?
Thanks, Diane. So the Expropriation Act in South Africa
has been long in coming. It's provided for in the Constitution, and it's been nearly 30 years of drafting this law. It does not provide for confiscation of land. What it does is it allows for a legal process reviewable by courts by which the state may compulsorily acquire property for certain purposes, including to restore that property to people from whom it was unfairly and unjustly taken in the past. In fact, it's the right of eminent domain. It's the same right that's enshrined in the American Constitution in the Fifth Amendment. In fact, it's quite a standard practice around the world that states have a right of eminent domain. What's striking here is that a legal process and a democratic state has established this right in law in South Africa. It is comparable to similar legislation around the world, and it has not yet been used. So it's entirely incorrect when President Trump characterizes this as a process of stealing land from white people or confiscating land. So there's a serious problem of misrepresentation of what the law is actually for.
Now, the big question is, does this plan really fix anything? Is sending people to remote and possibly dangerous places going to stop illegal immigration? Or could it actually make things worse by creating new problems we haven't thought through yet? It's a serious debate, and not everyone agrees on what the right answer is.